volunteered to lead this. Oh, oh,
Hi, people.
hi.
How's it going?
It's going well. How are things in Georgia?
Oh, they're good. It's a beautiful day. Had 3 cups of coffee and life's great. How are you? How's Colorado?
It's good. It's cooling off a little, but sunny. Pretty nice.
Nice. Ivan, how are the cats?
They're hiding from the cleaners.
Well, at least they're not scratching you. No one. Okay, cool. All right. Do we have some agenda items for today? What do y'all want to talk about? Also, we could give it another minute.
Just occurred to me that I had volunteered to update the Spin Python SDK to be Spin 3 capable, which I did not even think of until just now. So I'm gonna write a little to-do note.
That's cool. You know that I'll put SDKs as a agenda item so we can kind of get a handle on where everything is. I think Adam's out, so but I'll give an update of what I know. Go SDK. Hello, Vaughn. I've seen you so much today. It's really nice.
Yes. Third or fourth meeting today? Big
Yeah,
Monday.
this is for. Okay, let's just kick it off. Today is Monday, November 25th, 2024. We are at the Spin project meeting. We are going to maybe just do a little recap of what has happened because we just had KubeCon and a bunch of launches. We'll talk about remaining items that we have for, Spin 3.0, like post Spin 3.0 tasks. And then maybe we can set some context for kind of the rest of the year since holiday season is coming up and things that we want to maybe talk about what we want to focus on. And if anybody else has things that they want to talk about, feel free. So kicking off with SDKs. So we did do a cut of the Rust SDK with Spin 3.0 support. The one thing that I did not do on that SDK that I have an agenda item to do still is I need to build examples for WASI key value and WASI config. So I will work on that soon, probably this week or next week. Other than that, I don't see anything glaring on the Rust SDK. Does anybody have anything they want to add about the Rust SDK?
I'm curious about what type of release should be next for the Rust SDK, whether it's a major version. I'm not sure exactly uh how backwards incompatible that PR we merged was.
The Spin 3 support or or Ivan's Spin 3 support?
Yes, Spin 3 support, yeah. No, sorry, Ivan's PR.
Okay, Ivan's was the one updating WASI types. Let me just.
Whipbind Gen.
Oh, right. You bumped Whipbind Gen. Okay, yeah. Is that does that require a major version cut or is that
I don't think we know.
oh, wonderful. How
All the examples still build with no source changes. So to that extent, it appears compatible. It appears non-breaking, sorry.
okay.
But we've not kind of investigated any kind of weird edge cases.
Okay. I'm also gonna promise another thing this week or next week, in addition to the WASI examples. I'm gonna create some tests that do more than spin build. Because I think we added spin build for the examples recently to CI, but we should probably curl and make sure like we get the right responses and things like that. So I will take that as an agenda item.
My suspicion is that any breaking changes from going to WASI to going to Whitbind Gen 0.34 are going to be more in stuff that we don't kind of inherently surface. They'll be in things like the WIT or the Whitbind Gen modules, and there'll be things like changing handle to take handle or vice versa or something like that. That's why I ran into this, was because some other project I was doing was expecting take handle, I think it was, and the SDK was only providing handle or something like that. And these were not public well, they were not things that we documented or discussed or expected people to use. They're part of, and Joel and Brian could correct me on this, part of part of the binding infrastructure. But they
Yeah,
were
Yeah, those functions are marked with the doc hidden annotation because they are public, but they're not meant for application code to call, and really they're just there for generated code to call. But since the generated code lives in the same sort of, I don't know, privileged domain, crate domain as the application code, they have to be public. But yeah, so I guess the issue potentially would be, yeah, I think where we'd probably see breakage, if we do see breakage, is I know in the past we've had issues where there was like a third party crate, like I don't know, Leptos or Terso or whatever, that relied on a version of the Spin SDK, and then we were combining multiple Whitbind Gen versions. And I know Alex has done some work to basically to avoid issues with multiple Whitbind Gen versions being conflicting with each other. So I don't know if that sort of friction is a thing of the past, but it might be worth just digging up like a Leptos app or a Terso app that one way or another depends on an older version of Whitbind Gen, and see if it still works without any source changes. I think that's probably the closest thing we have to an acid test that I can think of.
Okay, that's a good plan. Ivan, do you have like an old Leptos app that we could maybe use that comes to mind?
I think if you generate one from the current template, then that should suffice.
Okay, and if everything just works, then are we like, what is our level of confidence that this is not like a breaking change?
Not super
50-50.
high. I mean, what's interesting about this though is I think it's almost worse if we increment the major version. I think it's actually going to be even worse for the Leptos and Terso apps out there, because then Cargo is not going to try to just use the newest version. It's going to try to use both versions, and I think that's probably where it's more likely to conflict. So it almost, in a way, seems safer if we feel like to just increment the minor version. But yeah, we'd have to just convince ourselves that there's no apps that our tests, our existing examples and test suite is representative enough that it's not gonna that it's gonna catch issues that wouldn't slip through the cracks.
That's
Okay.
a great point about a major version change. We've had this in the past when Leptos was on major version 2 and the SDK was on major version 3, and it produced these awful Rust linker errors because both of them were emitting sort of similar exports or the same export or something. So yeah, I'm with Joel on this. Let's try and avoid a major version rev if we can. Um,
And again, Alex has supposedly addressed that. It was this Cabby Realic thing, and he kind of did this fancy thing where, now Whitbindgen includes a little bit of C code because that was the only way we could express weak symbols, and then that tells the linker, hey, if you see multiple of these symbols, don't panic, just use whichever one you want to. So he explicitly tried to address that, but yes, I guess the only way to know for sure is to try both things. We could just locally, yeah, go ahead.
I think the issue that we ran into with Leptos was not the Cabby Realic one, or it might have been. It was those bonus functions that we add, bonus exports that we add to the SDK for things like version and language detection, which I think are not weak at the moment.
I gotcha. Yeah, no, that's a really great point. And they, by rights should be weak, but yeah, we'd have to do some work to kind of make them. So, yeah, that's a great point.
Or we could make them versioned, but again, that's additional work we'd have to put in for a rev.
Right. Yeah. I mean, at some point we can just stop doing that because well, I guess there's still benefits there. I think we were thinking, oh, because we have the language there. Basically, that whole mechanism is half superseded by the fact that Wit now has versions kind of in its symbols. But yeah, knowing the original programming language just by kind of looking at the binary can be real nice. So yeah, I mean, I'd love to just get rid of that whole mechanism entirely, but yeah, I don't know that we're quite at that point.
I think, Michelle, in the answer to your original question, we are we have high confidence, or if the Leptos stuff passes, then we have pretty high confidence that it's not going to affect app developers. What we know could be a problem is if somebody is generating code using an old version of Whitbindgen, that old version will currently work with the SDK, but that old version will not work with the revved version of the SDK. I think the odds of somebody doing that with resources, which I think are the only pain point, I think the odds of that are fairly low. So we may be willing to accept that as not breaking enough.
I think where this might come up is composition. If anybody's doing some sort of composition where they have intercomponent interfaces that are customized for their composition use case, and they're using Whitbindgen for that. I don't know if, I mean, it might be worth like pinging Thorsten, or who's done stuff like that in the past, just to see if he's got any apps we could test.
Okay, yeah, that sounds good. So I'm hearing that we will try to avoid a major version change or bump to the Rust SDK. We want to keep things at the current major version that they are. And we want to convince ourselves that it's not a major version change by doing some more testing with Leptos apps with the current template. And we'll also dig into some examples that have some robust composition scenarios to make sure those work as well. I would love if we could add these to our CI and then just like never think about it again. So I think these are two issues we should probably file as a follow-up to the Rust SDK and make sure those are good to go. But I think we're all on the same page about the Rust SDK now.
Can I add one comment to that, please? The project which motivated the rev to 0.34 has ground to a halt for other reasons, run into other problems.
Yeah.
So I no longer have that motivation. I mean, that's not an excuse to say we should stay on 0.16 forever, because clearly we shouldn't. But if we decide we want to defer revving Whitbindgen, then for me that is no longer an issue.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds good. Are there other things that we need in the latest Whitbind Gen though that would give us some motivation? Anything? Because it's real. What we're on is pretty old.
The only reason I used the newer version for my project was that I needed to cope with local packages, and BindGen 0.16 does not handle local packages.
Gotcha. All right. Cool. Okay.
I wonder, is it also going to choke, or maybe, I guess if we update the WASI versions like to 0.23 or something, I mean, some of the WIT files are starting to have like sense annotations and unstable annotations, stuff like that. And I guess that's probably not, WASM WIT-BindGen 0.16 probably won't handle that.
Yeah.
Though conversely, 34 doesn't handle the old float types. I'm just constantly running into F32, needing changing to F32 and so on.
I think it sounds like the bottom line is, once we have a forcing function that forces us to upgrade, then the decision will be clear. But it sounds like we're not quite there yet. If things work, then maybe we just let it lie. Uh,
So like let it lie in main and don't cut anything.
yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any, as far as I know, any security issues or something that would motivate. It would just, as soon as we have WIP files that this old version of WIT-BindGen doesn't understand, then we'll be forced to take action. But it sounds like we're not quite there yet. Uh, if Ivan's project is on hold.
By let it lie, I think what Joel means is revert, given I think we merged the 0.34 one. So I think what he's saying is we are the conservative solution is to revert to 0.16.
Controversial opinion. Something to think about is I feel like we like wait a lot, throughout the project to like do things until we have a forcing function, which I'm usually for. But I just feel like in this case, it might make our lives easier to upgrade now and like just to keep what we have in main and not cut a release unless we see like a really big, like, or not cut a release and not revert unless we see like a really big issue, and then we can start using those synths and whatever tags in our WIT files and not be completely scared that they're not going to work at least for the Rust SDK.
So my counter concern to that is we do not get to decide when we release. If somebody finds an issue in the Rust SDK that requires a release, what is our plan at that point? Do we take a long running branch just to avoid the 0.34 bump, or do we go, well, we'll have to roll the 0.34 bump into that fixed patch?
Yeah, that's a good point. So another option could be like to revert from main, have your commit in a branch and still create the testing that we thought about so that we just have like a record of that branch with the latest Whitbind-Gen running against all of the tests that we just talked about, but not have it in main. That's also one option.
I Yeah, I think my concern with that is that having it in a GitHub reference in the GitHub branch is going to result in less testing. You'll need to go through shenanigans to reference the GitHub branch, and then Cargo absolutely won't be able to unify any references. And I just get the feeling it will kind of sit there unused and untested. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's fair. Okay. I don't have a strong reason to not revert anymore. I'm good. I'm convinced. All right. So new plan, revert. Any objections? Okay. Okay, good. That's a good conversation. Do we want to wrap it up on the SDK here, on the Rust SDK here, or do we have anything else we want to add?
I think raising those testing issues is still worthwhile.
Agreed. Cool. Okay, Python SDK, you want to talk about that, Joel?
Yeah, I mean, there's not much to talk about. I just need to do the work, and it just didn't slip my mind until now that I had promised after KubeCon, that I would do it, and so.
Well, you had 10,000 engagements, so I don't blame you. So yeah, that sounds good. I think to give an update on the Go SDK, I think Adam was working on that, but there are a lot of nuances to that as well. So when he comes back, we can get an update on that. The JS SDK, did we cut a release of that with Spin? We did. Karthik cut that with the 3.0 support, so we're good on that one. Is there anything else that we should work on? I mean, what other SDK should we work on?
I can just do a quick status update on the C# side of things. I haven't been actively working on C# stuff for a while, but I've been kind of showing up at the meetings, the Bytecode Alliance meetings and whatnot. And the good news is all the changes, all the PRs I had open have been merged into main. They're not, it's this missed the release train for .NET 9, so none of that's in kind of a release state, but we all that stuff has been upstreamed, and I know the .NET developers are doing work to kind of get CI working for these native AOT, these ahead of time compilers, WebAssembly capable compilers to build builds for. They've had Windows x86 for a while, and now Linux and Mac. And so, bottom line is, once we get to the point where there's some official experimental builds signed by Microsoft out there, we'll be able to kind of remove my janky kind of locally built artifacts for these and use the upstream stuff without any patches. And at that point, I think that's probably a great time to kind of upgrade this experimental SDK to something more official. Move it out of my GitHub and into Fermyon and so on. So anyway, we're not quite there yet, but things are moving in the right direction after many months of effort from a lot of people. And at that point, also be a good time to, if not sooner, get Spin 3.0 support in there as well.
Sounds good. Yay. I know that was a lot of work, so awesome. Any other SDKs we want to talk about today? Oh, we have Python, JavaScript, Rust, and .NET, so we kind of covered all our bases. We're good. Okay, cool. I don't know why the Go SDK is not in I'm looking at the governance document, and that's not in our governance like core SDKs that we support. So I'll add that. And I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure why it's not there. I wrote that, so my bad. Let's see. SDK is good. Obviously, thanks to everyone who contributed to Spin 3.0. Thank you, Vaughn, for releasing, basically leading the entire release of the project, and Ivan for everything in the docs, and Joel also, and Brian, and everybody else who's contributed. That was a big effort. I am not deciding here, but I'm proposing that, we take the rest of the year to kind of work on maintenance and housekeeping items and those post 3.0 tasks. And I just want to set I just wanted to set a theme maybe for the rest of the year in case folks outside of this core group are watching or want to work on things for them to kind of know where our head is at and if they want to contribute where we think it would be helpful. So what do we think about, setting that as a theme for the rest of the year, or are there any, specific big ticket items that we want to work on in the next month or so? Okay, sounds good. And Ivan, can you think of anything any big ticket items that need to be addressed in the near term?
If there's nothing on the issue list, and I don't think there is, then no. And I think, as you say, it's maintenance, it's responding to bugs. If I have bandwidth, I'm going to carry on noodling on WASI Blob Store, but that's not a must-have thing. No one's depending on that. So
Okay, sounds good. Great. So then housekeeping will be the theme. And anybody else have any other items that you want to talk about in the next 4 minutes? All right. Thank you everyone for joining. I will see you next week. Cheers.